It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. We will remember them, honouring heroism and sacrifice on the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings.
How fortunate we were, and the entire free world, that a generation of men and women in the United Kingdom and other allied nations did not flinch when the moment came.
As Western leaders gathered to mark the anniversary, a warning from President Biden to Russia.
The United States and NATO and a coalition of more than 50 countries standing strong with Ukraine. We will not walk away.
In Russia, President Putin threatens to deploy long-range missiles closer to the West. Also tonight, dozens reported dead in an Israeli airstrike on a school in Gaza. Israel says it was targeting Hamas. The search for TV doctor Michael Mosley, missing while on holiday on a Greek island. And Elon Musk's SpaceX completes the first full test flight of the biggest rocket ever built. Plus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. King Charles has spoken of his profound sense of gratitude to the troops who left England 80 years ago today to fight to liberate Europe and defeat the Nazis. As veterans who'd gathered in northern France on the anniversary of the D-Day landings wiped away tears, Charles praised the bravery of the wartime generation and called on people to strive to live by their example. 150,000 Allied troops took part in D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion in history. More than 4,000 of them were killed on what became known as the longest day. Our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, reports from Normandy.
As the sun rose, there was peace. At 6 a.m. 80 years ago, those brave men started landing on Gold Beach. To the sound of bagpipes and gunfire back then. This time, hundreds gathering in remembrance of the thousands who'd rushed here to their death. At Versailles, the toll on British troops is etched on these columns. The King and Queen leading events, reunited with President Macron, reflecting on those close Anglo-French ties cemented in that time of war.
How fortunate we were, and the entire free world, that a generation of men and women in the United Kingdom and other allied nations did not flinch when the moment came to face that test. Our gratitude is unfailing, and our admiration eternal.
The Prime Minister was among those wanting to show his respects. Keir Starmer also observing an appropriate pause to election campaigning. Look at his hand and you can see the King was in no doubt who were the real VIPs. Despite his ongoing cancer treatment, they've been determined to be here. Just a couple of miles away, the Royal Marines were coming ashore. Wreaths and not weapons in their arms. Just one of many groups staging their own ceremonies for the 220 of their own who died. And men like Norman Ashford, who risked everything.
I don't talk about it.
You don't talk about it?
No.
Is it too hard to talk about?
I've been trying to put it away for a long time. But thank you very much.
Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah, I'm glad I've come anyway. Yeah.
Those who followed him in service, like Johnson Bahari, awarded the prestigious Victoria Cross, only full of admiration.
I walked the beach myself, and I looked at the stone, how close they were, and imagine all the bodies trying to negotiate through them. I get goosebumps even mentioning it to you.
Prince William had wanted to make his own impromptu stop at Arromanches to take in the atmosphere and meet those who'd come to remember. This entire coastline is a lasting memorial to the sacrifices that they made that day. But it is those increasingly rare personal testimonies from veterans that make this anniversary so significant, and the likes of which we will never see again. Making every effort to parade with their fellow soldiers, the town wanted to hold their own tribute to the veterans. This time, it was their decision to make this journey. Their frailty, no barrier, to again represent their country. And most proudly, their friends.
And Rhiannon joins us now from Bayeux in northern France. Rhiannon, a day laden with emotion.
It has been extraordinary to see how those stories of incredible bravery have literally brought people from all over the world to this part of Normandy. People from the 13 different nations that made up those Allied troops that landed on the beaches. Instead, today, people spending time taking in the sights and the sounds, frankly enjoying the sunshine on those beaches where tonight that fighting was still continuing 80 years ago and the death toll just kept on rising. But I think there has been this added significance this year, which everyone has acknowledged, the fact that we now have those very precious few veterans still with us, and only they really know what it was like that day. They have been truly treated like superstars with real love and respect, but they won't have any of that. They went on to live very happy, fulfilled lives. They had families, but it was their friends who never made it home, who would never be able to fulfill their dreams. And now, when you kneel down by those veterans, they very quietly, much more discreetly than the world leaders, will have one important message for you, that we really must never forget the freedoms that they fought for.
Rhiannon, thank you. As world leaders gathered to commemorate the start of the wartime effort to free Europe, there was one notable absence. Russia's President Putin had not been invited to attend, in contrast with previous years. Instead, Ukraine's President Zelensky arrived in Normandy to make his case to Western allies for more assistance in his country's war with Moscow. And in his D-Day address, the US President Joe Biden insisted that the West would not walk away from Ukraine. Our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons reports from Normandy.
The enduring resonance of D-Day brings the world's leaders here to Normandy to reflect on the past and to consider the future. Among them, a different dress code for a leader fighting a war at home. Volodymyr Zelensky arrived in France to warm embraces. He was among friends and also friendly strangers. An American D-Day veteran here hailed Zelensky for his leadership.
Oh, you're the savior of the people.
On a day when we remember the sacrifices of the past, he a reminder that Europe is still a continent darkened by war.
Thank you to the people of Ukraine for their bravery and their love of freedom. We are here and we shall not be weakened.
A decade ago, the Russian president was in Normandy for D-Day. Now Vladimir Putin is a pariah. There were no Russian officials present. But once it was very different. Here is Putin in 2013, presenting medals to British veterans. One of those veterans was here today, still full of life, but fearful that history is being repeated again.
War is no answer to the various things, and I have in my pocket now a message from Putin, who gave me a medal, a bravery award, and then goes and pulls a trick like marching into the Ukraine. It's terrible, but I just can't understand the human mind anymore.
If that seems like despair, then the American president brought resolve. At 81 years old, Joe Biden is almost certain to be the last US president who was alive at the time D-Day took place in 1944.
We will not walk away. Because if we do, Ukraine will be subjugated, and it will not end there. Ukraine's neighbors will be threatened. All of Europe will be threatened.
It is a troubling parallel, and this is a volatile time. In Normandy today, the past was precious, the future precarious. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Normandy.
In Russia, President Putin has warned that he could supply long-range weapons to his allies to strike Western targets. His comments came in response to a decision taken by NATO members to allow Ukraine to use their munitions to attack targets inside Russia. Our Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett reports from St. Petersburg.
On the anniversary of D-Day, Russia was making new friends and new threats. The St. Petersburg Economic Forum was the backdrop to Vladimir Putin's latest verbal volley that Russia could send missiles to other nations to target the West.
We are thinking that if they consider it possible to deliver such weapons to the combat zone, to launch strikes on our territory and create problems for us, why don't we have the right to supply weapons of the same type to some regions of the world where they can be used to launch strikes on sensitive facilities of the countries that do it to Russia?
The Kremlin claims it's merely responding to provocations.
British media, oh my God, you're not afraid of being here.
But isn't it the other way round?
This is absolutely upside down situation. We're not targeting anybody in Europe. We're not targeting any country of NATO or EU, but we're hearing and we're watching the aggressive approach from them.
So does this language bother delegates here? Apparently not.
I didn't follow the comments.
You haven't seen the comments?
No, I haven't seen the comments. Yeah, sorry.
As for China's envoy, no answer. Are you concerned at all about Vladimir Putin's comments that Russia could send weapons to other countries to strike Western targets? Can I ask you about dual-use goods? Is the West right? Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine?
Sorry.
There was a time when Western leaders and investors came here, but the guest list is very different now, as Russia tries to build a new world order.
The war in Ukraine is like one giant elephant in the room here. There's no mention of the so-called special military operation, and there's no talk of these latest threats from the Kremlin either. So in terms of winning friends and influencing people, it feels like Russia's succeeding here.
We need to continue the cooperation with Russia on the field of energy.
Even Hungary's foreign minister turned up, an EU and NATO country increasingly at odds with other members.
So what?
Some people might say you're guilty of sending the wrong signals.
But what is the wrong signal? Peace is a wrong signal. Desire for peace is a wrong signal. The sanction policy of the European Union has failed entirely.
Others would beg to differ, but you won't find those voices here. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, St. Petersburg.
Palestinian officials say at least 30 people have been killed in an Israeli airstrike on a school where people were sheltering in central Gaza. The Israeli military says the school was being used by Hamas as a compound and that it took steps to reduce the risk of harming civilians. Experts have told Sky News that the weapon used was likely provided to Israel by the United States. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi reports from Jerusalem.
The depressing arc of the war in Gaza is now as familiar as it is grim. Each day, Palestinian families mourn their dead. On the ground, the bodies of the victims are laid out. Some are covered with blankets. Others have been placed in body bags. In the early hours, the Israeli military hit this UN school, where thousands of displaced civilians were sheltering. Grief, along with hunger and fear, are ever present here, and people do not know how they will cope with their loss.
Every day there's news of another martyr. Every single day. A cousin, a brother, a stranger, an uncle.
They keep talking about a ceasefire, and then they say ceasefire talks have failed, or a ceasefire will take time. Meanwhile, bodies are being torn into pieces.
At the hospital, where medical services are nearing collapse, they do what they can for the survivors. But the injured keep coming. The IDF claims it tried to limit civilian casualties through aerial surveillance, and its fighter jets were targeting Hamas and Islamic Jihad militants who were operating in the building, who'd taken part in the October the 7th massacre. And the bloodshed shows no sign of ending. Israeli troops continue to push into Rafah as they also intensify their operations in central Gaza. For the people trapped here, the chance of a ceasefire feels a long way away. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well, let's get more now on the claims that an American-made weapon was used in the strike. Our US correspondent Mark Stone joins us now from Washington, D.C. Mark, what more do we know on that?
Well, we've looked at the remnants of the munition that was found at the scene. Evidence of it was posted very quickly on social media. We've geolocated where those photographs were taken. We've shown them to experts, and it is a GBU-39, a small diameter bomb made by Boeing here in the United States, and we know a shipment of those bombs was sent over to Israel some months ago, and it is the same type of bomb, same type of munition that was used 10 days ago or so in Rafah, where in that strike, which also killed many, many people. An investigation on that strike ongoing, and the Israelis say an investigation will take place on this strike as well. And as evidence of strikes continuing, have a look at this video and look at the very beginning of it, where you will see yet another airstrike, another building being destroyed, also in central Gaza. There was a warning the IDF gave, I'm told by the person who sent me this video, a source of mine who sent it to me, a short warning before that, and then the building was destroyed. 4 people killed in that attack. And I suppose the broad reflection is that, remember, it was only a few days ago that President Biden claimed that he was announcing a deal that that the Israelis had agreed to, and that Hamas would surely agree to again. Well, tonight it is clear that not only is Hamas not agreeing to that deal, but neither is Israel as either.
Mark, thank you. An emotional Amanda Knox has insisted that she is a victim and did not slander anyone after losing her bid to overturn a conviction in Italy. She's been speaking to Sky TG24, Sky News' sister channel in Italy, after a court in Florence found yesterday that she had wrongly accused an innocent man of killing Meredith Kercher in 2007. Our Europe correspondent, Siobhan Robbins, reports.
When Amanda Knox arrived at court in Italy, she was hoping to remove the final legal stain from her name. Instead, she was reconvicted of slandering a bar owner she accused of murdering British student Meredith Kercher in 2007. 24 hours later, speaking in Italian to Sky News' sister station, she had this message for local media.
Io non sono Foxy Knoxy.
I'm not Foxy Knoxy. I'm Amanda Knox. I didn't slander anyone, and I didn't kill anyone. I am a victim.
Nicknamed Foxy Knoxy by the tabloid press, Amanda Knox was 22 when she and her boyfriend were jailed for the murder of roommate Meredith Kercher. The 21-year-old was sexually assaulted and stabbed to death in the Italian city of Perugia. The pair were later completely cleared of the crime, But Amanda was found guilty of slandering Patrick Lumumba, who she named as the murderer under intense police questioning without a lawyer or qualified translator. A court ordered a retrial, only for Knox to be convicted for a second time.
It's an unjust and incorrect verdict. I was abused, mistreated. I was psychologically tortured by the police that night. I feel sad, but determined, because I will never stop telling the truth. I didn't slander Patrick. I didn't slander him, like I didn't kill my friend.
Knox will not return to prison, the 3-year sentence already served, but the lengthy legal battles left its mark.
Sono 17 anni che sono ingiustamente accusata.
I have been unjustly accused for 17 years. That is my entire adult life. I spent 4 years in prison as an innocent. From the beginning, I just wanted to do the right thing and tell the truth.
And Amanda Knox's fight to clear her name in Italy is far from over, with a vow to appeal this latest conviction. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News.
New figures show that the Conservative Party accepted £5 million from donor Frank Hester 2 days after Rishi Sunak condemned comments he'd reportedly made about Labour's Diane Abbott as racist and wrong. Meanwhile, the data from the Electoral Commission also shows that Labour received a £1 million donation from Dale Vince, who was criticised last month for saying that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter when asked about Hamas. Our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, has more.
Elections are big money affairs, but who is building the biggest war chest and where does the cash come from? Today, that was answered by the donations watchdog, the Electoral Commission. And here it is. From January to the end of March, the Tories raised just over £8 million. Labour on 6.6 million. Lib Dems, well, they were much further behind on 1.5 million. And the Greens, well, you can see that, just over £250,000. And here is the list of the biggest Tory donors. So this man, Sir Peter Wood, well, he founded Direct Line. Richard Harpin, he lent his helicopter to Rishi Sunak. And top of the list, by a mile, giving £5 million this year, IT firm, the Phoenix Partnership, run by a businessman at the centre of a major storm earlier this year, Frank Hester. Now, Hester is the largest ever donor to the Tories. In March, it was reported that he made these remarks about the then Labour MP, Diane Abbott, back in 2019. He said, "You just want to hate all black women because she's there. I don't hate all black women at all, but I think she should be shot." Hester denied that the comments were connected with skin colour or gender, but the Tories faced calls to hand back his cash, and Rishi Sunak publicly condemned the remarks.
What he said was wrong and racist. I've made that clear, and it's right that he's apologised for that, and where remorse is shown, I think that should be accepted.
Rishi Sunak gave the interview that you just saw on March the 14th. But the very same day, it's emerged the party was accepting yet another £150,000 from Mr Hester's company. Today, Labour said that this showed Sunak has no integrity. But what of Labour? Here are the list of their biggest donors. A hedge fund manager, lots of unions, and at the top, Ecotricity, which is run by this man, Dale Vince. Now, we revealed that he was the founding funder of Just Stop Oil. Tories called on Labour to return his money, but you can see here that the funds just keep rolling in. Another big Labour backer is Labour Together. That's a Starmerite think tank. Big money paying for staff who were seconded to the shadow cabinet. Run by this man, who it just so happens was last week selected for the plum Labour seat of Macclesfield in Greater Manchester, irritating the party's left. The Westminster Accounts Project traces how money works in our politics. At election time, that's more important than ever.
And a reminder that Sky News' Leaders event, the Battle for Number 10, will take place next Wednesday, the 12th of June, with Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer in our election target town of Grimsby. Do join us next Wednesday here on Sky News Live from 7 p.m. And you can apply to join the audience for that event by scanning the QR code on your screen now. South Africa's president and leader of the African National Congress Party, Cyril Ramaphosa, has said tonight that he wants to try to form a government of national unity following the country's parliamentary election. The ANC lost the majority it had held for 30 years, forcing it to enter into coalition talks with other parties.
The discussions have been constructive, robust, thoroughgoing, and have enabled us to emerge with a unified consensus position. The ANC acknowledges that we are at a moment of fundamental consequence in the life of our nation. Our country requires extraordinary leadership and courage to plot a way forward.
The TV doctor and columnist Michael Mosley has gone missing while on holiday in Greece. A search and rescue operation is underway on the island of Symi after Mr. Mosley's disappearance was reported to police there yesterday. The 67-year-old is known for his media appearances as well as popularising the 5-2 diet. At least 37 people have been admitted to hospital after a sudden wave of E. coli. The UK Health Security Agency says it believes most of the cases reported across the country in the last 2 weeks are part of a single outbreak linked to a food item distributed nationally. Jack Grealish, Harry Maguire and James Maddison have failed to make England's squad for the Euro 2024 tournament. The England manager, Gareth Southgate, called it a difficult day for those who didn't make the cut, but said others had proved their potential in recent matches. Elon Musk's SpaceX has successfully completed a test flight of the largest and most powerful rocket ever built at the fourth time of asking. The craft, known as Starship, splashed down for a soft landing in the Indian Ocean after previous attempts ended in spectacular explosions. Our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, reports.
Starship is designed to be the first fully reusable rocket large enough to get humans as far as the Moon, Mars or beyond.
4, 3, 2. We have to stop.
Its fourth test got off to a perfect start. And the first main objective was an undeniable success. The largest rocket booster ever built, separating flawlessly from Starship.
Stage separation confirmed.
Jettisoning a part implicated in its failure in previous tests before purposefully descending to Earth 17 metres of steel, performing a pirouette metres above the Gulf of Mexico.
And we have splashdown!
SpaceX staff rejoiced at proof their rocket will next be able to land itself. 100 miles up, Starship was in orbit. Now came the hardest bit, re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Where the last Starship burned up, this one sailed on at speeds of 17,000 miles an hour as the heat built up around it, its flaps controlling its descent. Only then did things start to go wrong, friction with the thickening atmosphere overwhelming the heat shielding, and Starship's flaps started to melt.
Looks like we got the flaps starting to come apart a little.
It looked like it was all over. But incredibly, the crippled ship appeared to steer itself right until splashdown in the Indian Ocean.
We know it came down, it was a bit wounded, there was a flap hanging off, but the real victory here is that they've got data through all that descent sequence. So all the way down through descent, when the ship is heating up, when the thermal protection tiles are starting to burn off.
Elon Musk, here in green, the owner of SpaceX, declared the test a success. But the heat is on. He's got a nearly $3 billion contract with NASA to take astronauts to the Moon on Starship as early as 2026. Not much time to prove it's flight-worthy. Tom Clark, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by economist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the Sunday Telegraph's political editor, Camilla Turner. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of The Guardian, its headline, pressure on Tories to return £15 million donations after new Hester claims. We'll bring the paper up when we come back. Do stay with us. Watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Veterans and world leaders have taken part in a day of events in northern France to commemorate the 80th anniversary of D-Day. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has said he's considering supplying Russian allies with weapons that could hit Western nations. More than 30 people have been killed in an Israeli airstrike on a school-turned-shelter in Gaza. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the Sunday Telegraph's political editor Camilla Turner. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Metro leads with King Charles joining in and praising veterans in Normandy for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. In the footsteps of heroes is the Telegraph's headline on the same story. A similarly striking front page on the Express. It notes both the King and Queen were emotional during the commemorations. Reform UK is surging in the polls under its new leader, Nigel Farage. That's according to The Eye. The Guardian has an exclusive story regarding questions over the Conservative Party's decision to keep more than £15 million given by its biggest ever donor, Frank Hester, after concerning allegations against him. The Times reports around 20 Green Party election candidates have shared offensive material online, including anti-Semitic slurs and conspiracy theories. The Financial Times reports on the European Central Bank cutting interest rates for the first time in 5 years, which could be a milestone in the fight against inflation. The Mail reports one of its contributors, Dr. Michael Mosley, is missing in Greece. The Star has a story about the mood of voters towards politicians. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Steve Richards and Camilla Turner. Welcome to both of you. Let's start with the front page of the Telegraph, but the story on many of the front pages, the commemorations, 80th year of commemorations, D-Day landings today. That photo, very striking, on the front page of the Telegraph, Steve.
Yeah, and it's good to have a collective memory. You know, I think memory of the past can fade very, very quickly. And these kind of annual commemorations are therefore important. But I think so are the lessons from them. It's very interesting, the juxtaposition, you know, the first three items in your news bulletin I found fascinating. The first one was D-Day. And the horrors of war, basically, being reflected on. And then the next was Putin giving weapons to allies to strike the West. And the third was another Israeli attack on Gaza. And there's a danger that some of the lessons aren't going to be learnt. But it's good that we all together reflect on the past. It wasn't that long ago, but as I say, collective memory can fade very, very quickly. But
today, Camilla, we saw a lot of emotion. You know, the scenes were very striking and I think stirred many, many people.
That's right, and I think quite a lot of the newspaper front pages have picked up specifically on just how moving the King's comments were at this D-Day commemorative event, talking about how many of the veterans were sort of overcome with emotion while listening to the King give that very powerful address today. And what a lot of the commentators have pointed out is that this anniversary may well be one of the last anniversaries that we have living survivors from D-Day. It's an older generation who sadly are dying out. So it really just puts the onus on the future generations to continue remembering the D-Day spirit and remembering what happened there, even if the voices from that era aren't there to tell the tale themselves.
Steve, Camilla mentions the royal family. Queen Camilla seemed to be quite emotional. The King also really feeling...
Well, they're human beings. I mean, there are many human beings who find this very powerful and moving. But as I say, it's great when we look back, but I worry about a lot of the language around at the moment about Britain needing to be on a war footing, Britain needs to be prepared for World War III. They become self-fulfilling prophecies. And so, yes, it was powerful and moving. But let's hope we're not slipping into another nightmare.
You're saying that sort of language worries you, that we need to be on a war footing?
Yeah.
I mean, some might say that it's
Well,
prudent.
I studied history. One of my heroes was this legendary historian called A.J.P. Taylor, and he wrote about the origins of the First World War, and there was a naval arms race, and there was talk of the inevitability of conflict, and it became sort of self-fulfilling. And so I do worry about some of the language. And that's why it's great that we do reflect and look back at pivotal moments in that Second World War, which followed a First World War just 3 decades earlier. And yeah, but I do worry about some of the language being used at the moment as well.
But definitely the theme of, you know, the hope that lessons have been heard. We heard from President Biden, from President Macron, and all speaking to that theme.
Absolutely. We had Biden in particular really drawing those parallels with the war in Ukraine at the moment, talking about the importance of standing up to authoritarian leaders wherever they are in the world, the importance, once again, of the West uniting in the face of threats they might face. So particularly today with war once again on the continent, it seems kind of more pertinent than ever to look back and remember what happened in the past. And I suppose remember that collective spirit that we've faced in the past and are needing to show again today.
And Steve, the King talking about his profound sense of gratitude, essentially. I mean, do you think that's something that perhaps the younger generation are aware of? Do you believe that they're grateful for the sacrifices made?
Yeah, if they reflect on it. But as I say, I think, you know, memory fades very, very quickly. I'm struck how many people aren't even paying any attention to this general election, which is important and fascinating. So I think it can seem like a very distant past. It's not really. So I don't want to dismiss the young and say that we're young and we're reflecting on it. And so I think we could all show the gratitude of youth. So I don't think it's that. It is that. With social media and everything happening in 5 seconds, it is easy for the Second World War to be seen as some distant, ancient thing, and it's not. So it's good it's on the front pages and got such coverage today. But as I say, the lessons are partly about how wars end. Actually, this was a pivotal moment towards that. There were many others. And what worries me about Ukraine and so on is how is this going to end? Gaza. But anyway, that's for another day. We'll be here all night if we explore that one. OK, let's
move on. Should we have a look at The Guardian, Camilla, and this story about the pressure on the Conservatives to return £15 million worth of donations, this being, I think, their largest donor, Frank Hester, after the comments that he's allegedly made re Diane Abbott. But the story has taken another twist.
That's right. So there was already an almighty row about Frank Hester earlier this year, who at that time had donated £10 million to the Tory party. And The Guardian earlier this year reported on some very derogatory comments he made about Diane Abbott. Now, the Conservative Party, they said they considered the matter closed. He apologised for it, job done. And since then, it went on to accept another donation of a further £5 million. Now, what The Guardian are reporting today, they're saying they've spoken to over a dozen former employees of Frank Hester's company, and they've unearthed yet more derogatory comments that he allegedly made to his staff at that company. So really, it's just putting that spotlight back on the Conservative Party again. It's, of course, not helpful for them to be seen as a party who are in bed with people making allegedly racist and kind of derogatory comments to staff. It's not the kind of people that they would want to be seen to be associated with, yet at the same time are accepting donations from him. So a bit of a catch-22 for them.
Just to say, we've not heard from Frank Hester on these new claims, and he previously denied making sexist and racist comments regarding Diane Abbott.
It is interesting, though, because it shows that they feel they need the money more than any attempt to show that they're not, in inverted commas, the nasty party or anything. They feel they need the money. And, in a battle, I can understand that need. I wonder whether parties do need quite as much as they spend. But there is a sort of, I was talking about that naval arms race, there is a sort of race to raise money for these election campaigns. And they've decided, whatever the reputation or not that Camilla referred to, they want the money. and they're going to spend it extravagantly in the weeks to come.
Extravagantly? Do you know something that we don't?
No, nothing at all. It's just extravagant because a lot of the stuff that actually gets out there on television and all the rest of it, you know, when you interview them and others, that doesn't cost money at all. But, I mean, if one party raises money, the other feels they need to raise more, and the Tories tend to get more from businesses, and they're going to take it, whatever hit they get for doing so.
OK, Camilla, to the Telegraph, and they're reporting that Sir Keir Starmer is going to pledge recognition for a Palestinian state in the Labour Party manifesto, which I think they're saying will come out next Thursday.
That's right. So this is a sort of leak ahead of the manifesto. Quite an interesting one, because there is a whole dynamic within the Labour Party that they're really trying to repair relations with the Muslim community in the UK. We saw in the local elections an interesting phenomenon, which was the rise of independent candidates running on a pro-Gaza ticket. And in parts of the UK that have majority Muslim, or, you know, have a substantial number of Muslim voters, these independent candidates did very well. And these were normally kind of safe Labour seats, so essentially taking votes away from the Labour candidates. Now, this is something that the Labour Party have been keen to recognise or address in some way, and it suggested that this pledge in their manifesto to recognise a Palestinian state before peace talks are over, that's quite a crucial thing, because it puts them at odds with allies such as the US, who say that recognition of a Palestinian state should take place, but as part of a peace settlement. So it's something that I suppose Keir Starmer is hoping will play well with Muslim voters, but may risk causing divisions with allies.
Steve, do you think it's a bold move, and do you think it might appease some Muslim voters?
It's not a bold move. I mean, it's existing policy, and it's known to be that, and it's in the manifesto because, I mean, and in an election, everything is done with the voters in mind. They have, as Camilla explained, got a Gaza problem in some parts of the country. It's very interesting. They've got this gargantuan poll lead, but a friend of mine who was canvassing in 2 seats very near each other in Scotland, actually, texted me and said Labour were really picking up substantially in one SNP seat and not in the other, neighbouring one. And the reason was Gaza in one and not the other. And so in parts of the UK, there is this Gaza issue, and that's why they've decided to give it the prominence they have in the manifesto. So it's an existing policy given prominence, and that's why.
OK. Steve and Camilla, thank you very much for the moment. Going to take a break. Coming up, this story on the front of the Eye. Its headline, Reform surges again as new polls show Farage effect. More on that when we come back. Do stay with us.
We looked at participants who are from memory clinic, those who are at higher risk of developing dementia, and they also have concerns with memory and cognition. So we wanted to see if people who have something called as cognitive reserve, this build up by staying active mentally, physically, and had higher social interactions. So we realized that stress had a negative impact on spending time in leisure activities, or even has frequent attractions from social interactions. So we wanted to see that if these kinds of beneficial effects of cognitive reserve and cognition and Alzheimer's biomarkers had negative impact on stress, and if it varied by subjective and biological stress. And we sort of found that overall higher chronic stress appears to negate or undo the cognitive benefits we have by engaging in mentally stimulating activity and participating in enriching life activities, which might make people more susceptible to Alzheimer's. In research, we do have a lot of multi-domain interventions, like we focus on diet, physical activity, but we don't introduce like stress management practices like meditation or even mindfulness. It's a non-pharmacological intervention, so I think it could be interesting to see if involving those elements into our everyday life, not just memory clinic patients, increases our overall brain health per se.
Welcome back. You are watching the Press Preview. Still with me, columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the Sunday Telegraph's political editor Camilla Turner. Let's start this section by looking at the I newspaper and their front page. And they are detailing what the Farage effect has been, according to certain polls. Steve, take us into this.
Yeah, well, this is becoming one of the narratives of the campaign. Will reform, now Farage is leading it, catch up and overtake the Tories? Now, actually, this poll gives the Tories a bigger lead than one yesterday, which gave reform just 2 points behind the Tories. They're further behind now, but compared with the last time this poll was out and about, reform are making big gains. And this tells us two things. First of all, that they're making big gains. Two, that newspapers are really focusing on this narrative. You know, it still gives Labour a huge lead. It doesn't look as if it's going to be a close election if the polls are right. So there is this new dimension for papers to focus on and us lot to focus on. Will they overtake the Tories? And that's the sort of hidden question underneath that poll. And Tories are terrified that this might happen in terms of the polling.
Yes. Camilla, is the Farage effect real?
I would say yes. I think there is an argument that reform were already, perhaps in a kind of low-level way, creating an appeal for some disaffected Tory voters. But once Farage entered the stage, that has just completely shot up. He's a real character. He's a sort of a household name. People like him. People are kind of drawn to him who are on that side of the political spectrum already. And it's really just changed that dynamic completely. So if things were going badly for the Conservatives in the election, as soon as Nigel Farage entered, I think anyone would know that they were about to get a whole load worse, because his impact, the personality he brings to the Reform Party really just gets people listening and talking about it, gets him on the front pages of the papers. The broadcasters love him. So it's really changed the dynamic of the Reform Party taking away voters who were already a bit dissatisfied and a bit disaffected by the Conservatives.
It will also freak out Tory strategists. Even if it doesn't happen that Reform catches up with them in the polls and on election day in terms of the vote, they won't win many seats. It fuels a kind of sense of disturbance. It happened to Labour in the 80s with the SDP Liberal Alliance in elections then when Thatcher won landslides, as Starmer might win a landslide in July. The fear of this third party catching up feeds on itself, and the party feeling threatened becomes more disturbed, and the leader does as well, in this case Sunak. And so it's becoming a kind of sub-theme of an election which appears to be very one-sided, this one.
We shall see how it develops. Let's have a look at the Mail. It's also in The Guardian, and this quite sad story that Dr. Michael Mosley is missing in Greece. This is the doctor, the TV doctor, made famous by his 5-2 diet. Very well-known character, been missing since yesterday.
Yeah, I find this really worrying and disturbing. I mean, he's our guide. He worries about us. You know, he does these great 50-minute programmes on Radio 4 about, you know, just little things that can make you healthier and things. So we're used to following him, and now we're the ones worried about him. I mean, I hope it's okay, but it is very worrying, and the Mail's put it on the front, and that suggests it's worrying, doesn't it?
Yes, and quite a search has been and continues to be taking place, Camilla.
Yes, that's right. A kind of quite major search underway on this Greek island, but with sort of support coming in from the mainland, from Greece. The police currently think he might have slipped or fallen or tripped whilst hiking on this Greek island. So this manhunt's continuing, but obviously very worrying in the meantime, just not having any news about what's happened and whether they'll be able to find him.
Yes, we hope that that's a happy outcome. We'll keep across that story. Steve and Camilla, thank you very much for taking us through the papers. We shall see you at the top of the hour. Coming up next on Sky News 11, veterans and world leaders have attended a day of events in Normandy.